Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Artist Block. My name is Noodle Dog, and today we're going to be talking about volume. When it comes to volume, as far as a piece, a lot of times you want to build up form and figure, and it all has to do with surface area, volume, how big something is, how much something takes up space in, and we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be finding ways to actually express such things. So when I think about volume in a piece, let's draw an apple real quick. I'm gonna draw an apple, and we're gonna do this really easy. There we go. We got ourselves a little apple. Okay, that's an apple. It's pretty cool, but as you can tell, the apple is in a 3D. It's not in a 3D space. It's actually rather flat. It doesn't look anything special. And I'm fleshing this little apple out, and while sure this looks like an apple, but we can definitely make it look a little bit more intriguing, especially as far as the figure goes. When it comes to the figure, a lot of times when you're drawing, the idea is to perceive something in a more realistic light, even though you're portraying it on a two-dimensional surface. A drawing usually is supposed to be two-dimension. However, we can trick the eye into thinking that something is more directional or more rounded based on how we figure with things, and the best way to do that in the basic sense is adding volume and depth. And the best way to do that basically, as far as all the different methods of doing shading and shadowing, is hatching and cross-hatching. Now, you've probably seen these techniques before. Hatching and cross-hatching in particular are very common in the industry as far as creating things, but hatching and cross-hatching are basically, if I were to take this apple for instance, just taking a form and drawing lines on the form until you have I wouldn't necessarily say a rounded form, but almost like building up color. And the color is a good way of figuring out how something turns in space. Turning in the sense of creating roundness and creating a more cohesive three-dimensional form on a two-dimensional plane. So when we work on stuff like this, we think about hatching and cross-hatching. And this is a basic example of hatching. Hatching is simply just taking a couple of lines like this of varying lengths and sizes. It could be any number of lengths. There's many different ways to hatch. And you basically add them to these different areas to create patches of color and volume that in which the dark aspects tend to fade out towards the back of the composition, and the lighter composition actually pulls forward, giving us an illusion of depth. Now, hatching is the easiest one to do because hatching is just boom, 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 a bunch of simple lines and you've got yourself hatching. Cross-hatching is a little bit different, but if you understand what cross is, you would understand cross-hatching. Cross-hatching is just taking these lines that we just drew here, didn't want to do that, and you just cross them with other lines. And that's basically cross-hatching. Cross-hatching actually develops more form because cross-hatching is going against the grain of the other lines, and the intersections usually have darker points to which you have all these beautiful darker tones. Now I'm going to show you can take hatching and cross-hatching to really interesting levels. So let's have a look at this. So I'm just going in and I'm just going to vary the sizes. As you can see, the darker it is, usually it's more close together, more compact, and then I can separate it to make it more a much more lighter composition, and I can bring it back in and I can make it really tight, and then I can bring it right back out. And if I were to zoom out right now, you can see that there is a nice consistency with the hatching. You can see that it's all one nice little shade, and then there's different points where the hatching gets really close, and you could even see how it's starting to form, how it's starting to turn, it's starting to get darker. You could even see that the form is starting to pull itself back, so the lighter parts can actually pull forward and give us an illusion that there is depth to the piece. Now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to go cross-hatching. And with cross-hatching, it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. Usually I do it a diagonal cross-hatch. That's what I usually do. But cross-hatching has many forms. So this is just a normal cross-hatch. I'm going to actually do like this just to make sure we have it. And then I'm going to space my cross-hatching out. And then I'm going to bring it back in again. Just with just like I did with my hatching. I'm going to pull it out. And you can see there's even more depth, and there's actually a little bit of texture in there because the texture of the intersections is starting to pull out these different forms and colors to make it a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit more oriented. You could even go further and add more hatching to make even more dramatic cross hatching. So I'm going to go this way now. Don't mind me, I'm just going to do like this. But as you can see, the darker I get depends on how many lines I use, how close together the lines are, and even if I just wanted to just have a little bit of fun with how the hatching is. And let's zoom back out again so you can see what I'm talking about with this one. Let's zoom back out, hold on. There we go. You can see, once again, there's even more form and figure, and it's starting to get a nice little sense of motion. It kind of almost looks like a baseball bat being swung, right? Baseball bats don't swing like this, but you can kind of see that it's giving an illusion of motion even. And this is actually a technique that a lot of people use when they actually do animation or do comics. They use a very serious series of hatching to actually get these really blurry figures to make them look like they have more oomph to them when they're moving around. Okay, so we talked about hatching and cross hatching, but there's different ways to do hatching and cross hatching. I sometimes like to do scribble hatching, which is, I just call it building up to. It's just about layering. So I'll just take this for instance, and I'll just do a little bit of a scribble. And as you can see, it's doing a similar effect as when I started hatching. I'm going to pull it apart. And then pull it right back in. And I'm going to keep doing that. And you can see sometimes my pencil tends to render really. Like if I finish something, then it darkens, and I don't know why it does that, but that's beside the point. And you can see that I'm achieving a similar effect if I just go ahead, let me move this over so you guys can see it. There we go. And I'm just going to do the same thing that I did. I'm going to do more hatching like this. I'm going to stretch it out just a bit, and then I'm going to tighten back in a bit, and I'm going to pull it out, and you can see that I'm starting to get these really interesting shapes and a little bit more of a darker consistency just by going around through it. And then there's other ways to do hatching too. You can also do hatching like this, where you just take lines and you just make little lines to get some form of texture. They don't have to be cohesive. They don't have to be interesting. They can be fuzzy. They can be kind of wild and wacky. But these are just ways to tone up things like this. So look at that. As you can see, I'm getting tone on one thing. You could even do this just to create an illusion of texture too. So if I were to do this apple piece over here, let's go back to the apple. Let's just say I wanted to do, for all intents and purposes, I want to make the apple kind of lumpy looking. I can do the same thing by just, let's lower my thing. And I could just do like this. You can curl it a little bit even to just get a little bit of texture to it. But as you can see, I'm starting to get a little bit of texture to this apple, and it's starting to get kind of really interesting as far as the surface of the apple when I pull it out. It's got a little bit of like a lumpy quality to it. You can kind of see that it's getting kind of weird, but it still has that consistent color that you were looking for in hatching and cross hatching. And that's what you want to look for when you're doing hatching and cross hatching. You want to make sure that it doesn't necessarily have to make sense, but it has to be at least, when you zoom out, you want your eye to fool itself into saying that's gray, or that's dark gray, or that's a lighter version of the color, because that's what hatching and cross hatching does. It just gives an illusion of a lack of color. It's like a gradient, but it's a little bit more interesting to me. I feel like this is more interesting than using an airbrush to try to get a gradient on some things. Okay, so we explained that, and there are a couple other ways you can do hatching and cross hatching. Like I said before, you can make it kind of fuzzy like this, and then just do it like that. And don't be afraid to get all kinds of into your pieces. Like if I take this brush has like a, as you can see, has a tilt function, so where I can actually use it like a regular pencil, like I would use it. You could do the same thing with this, and you could do hatching. It's just a really tight hatch, you know. You could use the side of your pencil to create a nice even tone, and then go over it in a hatching style, cross hatching style, and just go over it, and you can eventually build up tone until it gets to the point where it gets like this. Cool. Alright, then there's stippling. Stippling is another technique that I use sometimes. Stippling is just an idea of taking dots to create a sense of volume and mass. So let's go ahead and let's redraw that apple. I'm going to get my pencil just a little bit bigger. There we go. Let's draw a skinny apple. Do that. And then I always found apples have really weird sides like that. But there you go. That is your apple. We're gonna get another apple. All right. And let's say this time we want to create. You want to do a little bit more of a textured appearance without the use of hatching, because sometimes hatching can be really smooth. Stippling, I find, gives it a little bit of texture. And if you use pure stippling, like some people do, like if I were just to erase this part, you can use something called pointillism, which is taking a bunch of points and creating an image just by focusing points on certain areas. But let's stick to just stippling for now. Stippling is really simple. It's just taking dots like this, and you're just going to make a whole bunch of dots, and you're going to put them together. The more dots you put together, the darker the composition. As you can see right now, I'm having a whole lot of dots at the edge because that's where the occlusion shadow is. That's where most of the dark portions are. And then I'm going to slowly bring my way back up here, and you see that I'm going to be moving a lot more away from the line of the edge of the apple. And then as I start to get further away from it, you can see that I'm starting to do less and less dots. And then I'm going to move away like this. And then I'm just going to keep moving and moving until I have my complete form. And as you can see, it kind of looks like, it feels like a quail egg almost, but as you can see, it's starting to get its turn of form. You can still, of course, add more, like I could do this to give it some form of depth, right? Just to do this, just a little bit. And then I could just do that to make a shadow. And then if I were to zoom out, give me a second, I'm going to zoom out in just a second. You want to give the illusion that it's starting to form out. So there you go, there's a little apple with a little bit of stippling. You can see it's actually got an interesting figure to it. It's got some nice texture to it because it's starting to get these dots and turn it into something interesting. So those are all things you want to keep in mind. And one more that I have that you can definitely try doing is hairballing. Hairballing is it sounds gross, but it's basically just a bunch of spirals to create what looks like hair coils. It looks kind of like this. I used to do this a lot when I was starting out in drawing because it was the best way to build up form. Let's go ahead and do a circle this time. Let's do a regular circle this time. And let's just say I want to make it nice and interesting. You can take these little coils and you could basically make them as elliptical or as round as you want. So let's just say I want to do really round ones. I'm just going to go over them slowly. As you can see, it's building up form to the point where it's starting to get a nice even texture. And I could even separate the coils a little bit more to create a less or more shadowy figure. So let's go ahead and make it like that. And as you can see, I can go back over it in different directions. You could do cross-hatching in just these directions too, like this, see? It's really easy. You just gotta experiment with what you like, and you gotta figure out how you're gonna do it. But each way has its own unique way of creating things. You can create your own way of hatching. Like sometimes you could do something like this, and maybe mix it up with a little bit of these. And you got your own little style of hatching, and this kind of works in both directions. You could do all kinds of things with them. And you can also, which is the last thing I'm going to talk about today, you can also map your shadows. Shadow mapping is really important when you're starting off, especially if you don't know how to separate light values from dark values. And a lot of times, I'm going to draw a bottle real quick. Give me a second. A lot of times you can use shadow mapping to create a way of understanding the value of something. So when you put something up, as far as the values and the colors in the image, you can use them to your advantage by just mapping the shadows out and seeing what part is light, what part is dark, and how not to touch it. In fact, a lot of shadow mapping, you see it in anime and stuff like that, where they have line, like a nice little line before they hatch, and it gives it a guideline, but it still makes it look clean. So I'm going to do that with this one. I'm going to lower my brush down just a little bit, and I'm going to use a green. And I usually use color in these because I want you guys to have like a advantage as far as, you know, not having to color pencils or anything like that. You don't have to, but this is definitely an interesting way to do it. So let's go ahead. I'm going to map the shadows of this one. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Map the shadows out of this one. So let's just say we're going to do like this. That's a darker color. This here is a light. Right here. We're going to make this one light. And then we can make this one another color. Like maybe make this one like another color. Like that. And then we can make this one something like that. We could figure something out. But basically, now that I have my shadows mapped, I can pick which one of these shadows, especially if it's accompanied with an actual life figure. I can say, okay, well, this shadow is this color, this one's going to be lighter, this one's going to be darker, how so on and so forth. And I can demonstrate that by just going in at it. So I can make the darkest part of the shadows here. I can just use my build up on the farther edges of the shadow map. I'm just going to follow it exactly. I'm not going to try to go over, because that would be a pain in the butt. Okay. And you can even use different colors if you know how to approximate colors or match colors together. If you know how to paint really well, you know how to approximate colors, you can do the same exact thing. But for all intents and purposes, we're just going to use a pencil, or we're going to use a pencil tool, in my case, because I'm doing digital art. And now for the next one, we're going to do it a little bit lighter. There we go. As you can see, it's starting to get really nice. But even that's kind of stretching it, so why don't we add a little bit of cross-hatching to this one? Especially in areas where you'd want cross-hatching, so I'm just going to go ahead and figure that out. And as you can see, mapping it out helps create these more interesting ways of making value. And then we got a light value right here, so I'm going to leave it alone. And then we could do the same type of value again, like this. There we go. And this is not a perfect example of hatching, by the way. Usually I don't think light actually ever hits a bottle in this magnitude or this way, but it's just a demonstration of how you would do it. And then you would go ahead and you get your darker tones in there. And bing, bang, boom, you've got your beautiful wine bottle. I'm going to hit it with a crosshatch so it matches the other one a tad bit. And you can always go back in and adjust. This is the best part about it. Don't be afraid to erase if something doesn't feel right. That's why we go in small, light layers, because once you get past a certain point, especially with a traditional pencil, a pencil will stop depositing lead or graphite onto a paper, and it'll start to get this nice sheen on it. And that means that the paper is literally taking all the deposits it can of the metal, and if you would take a brush and just brush it off, all the stuff that you've been laying on it will just whoosh, go right off. So keep that in mind when you're working too. I can do this just to make it a little bit more interesting. There we go. So that is how you do some coloring. There we go. Alright, and so this is the basic thing going on. As you can see, we've covered quite a bit today. We have a lot of interesting things going on at this table today. But I want you guys to just kind of practice this. If you're having trouble trying to build up and you're not good with color, try hatching and cross-hatching first. It's a good way to build up your color understanding. So that is basically it. That's all we're going to do for today. If you like this video, give it a like, give it a subscribe, comment and tell me what you think about this video. I have something I'm going to put at the end of this video that I want you guys to see. It's me working on a cross-hatching piece because I think that it would be best to show you what a completed picture looks like. So I'm going to show that at the end of the video. And with that being said, hope you guys have a good day.